my teeth and shake a tail fin. A bikini babe, catching a roadway. A big surprise, I'm gonna rise and flash my tooth cane. All the buff dudes, safe on the beach food. They're gonna need a bigger boat and barrels real soon. I'm a sea king, a CGI thing. I'm here to eat and bare my teeth and shake a tail fin. I'm only taking a ride. Looking by your bucket and shout. It's one weakness I can't hide. Take me to your bucket and shout.
Mega Mayhem continues with Mecha Shark vs Mecha Shark from 2014, directed by Emil Edwin Smith. And if you recognize that name, it's because he directed Ice Sharks from 2016, which was a movie I was not a huge fan of. I found it to be a little bit boring, but hopefully this episode, or this movie, is a little bit more exciting. As always, I'm your host, Captain Steve, and you're listening to Bucket of Chum, the Shark Movie Podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave a like or subscribe or 5-star rating, whatever you can do to help the show. And yeah, like I said, we're back with Mega Mayhem, the third movie in this month's series, from the Asylum, of course. And this movie has some decent stars in it this time around. So we have Christopher Judge, who is from Stargate SG-1. He played Teal'c, a show I'm a big fan of. My girlfriend is also a fan of. I definitely have a few friends that are fans of it as well. It's nice seeing him in something else. I know he's done other stuff. I just can't really think of anything I've seen him in other than Stargate SG-1. We also have Elisabeth Röhm, whom I only recognized from Angel, but she played a detective for 15 episodes, so I did recognize her from that. And returning from the first movie, Debbie Gibson is back playing Emma McNeil, the same character, and this time she's lost in Mecha Shark's eyes. Let's get into the Letterboxd plot synopsis, except this time I'm actually going to use IMDb because the Letterboxd plot synopsis was so long and convoluted, and we really didn't need it. So I'm going to defer to IMDb for the plot synopsis this time. A new mega shark threatens to destroy humanity. The government creates an exact robotic copy of the shark, either equal to or greater than the original. Now they must fight to the death while people and whole cities get in the way. So, I mean, it's the same as all the other movies, really. There's a big shark, and then there's another thing that's going to fight the shark. That's all you really need to know. This has an average rating of 1.7 stars on Letterboxd, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure the last two movies as well have had the same rating, more or less. Again, it's The Asylum. It's from 2014, which is kind of around like the two-headed shark, three-headed shark era. So this could be a little bit better than what we got with the first two movies. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see, of course. Poster expectations, the same, again, as the last 2 weeks, really. Again, I'm only hoping for some slightly better CGI just because this does take place a few years later, or was made a few years later, because I think the last movie was 2010, and this is 2014. So technology's come a little bit farther in the last 4 years. And like I said, this is right around the era of two-headed shark attack, three-headed shark attack, when their CGI was starting to look a little bit better and actually pretty half-decent and, in my opinion, at least watchable. So I'm kind of excited to see what they do with the Mecha Shark and Mega Shark in this movie. And actually taking a closer look at the poster, the graphics are a little bit better than the last two as well. So yeah, it feels like they're improving upon a little bit of everything, which is nice. But again, it's just the two sharks facing off against each other. Man, imagine they took the plot of Face Off and applied it to a shark movie. That would be fucking insane. I would watch that. If any filmmakers listening, you can have that idea, because I don't even know how to execute that. Unless, like, you play it off like Thanksgiving, where you just switch a human and a shark's face, and you just play it off like nobody can fucking tell. That would be amazing. That's something I want to see. But yeah, we're not here to talk about that. What I am going to tell you is a fun science fact. This is something I'm going to do with the movies now. I'm going to just give you a little fact about the type of shark that is in the movie or creature, what have you. So, of course, this is a megalodon. And the fact is, many people believe that the megalodon still exists, that it's still alive today. But there is actually no distinct or great evidence to suggest that this is actually true. The reason this has become so sensationalized was because there was a documentary on the Discovery Channel called like Megalodon Still Alive or some shit. I don't know. I'm not going to give it any credit because it doesn't have any evidence. It's basically like TLC. Discovery Channel and TLC are basically just becoming the same thing. They used to have a lot of great programming, and now it's just like a pile of shit piled on top of itself. But that's a whole other topic. But yeah, I'm sorry. The Meg, as far as I'm concerned, isn't out there in my opinion. If you want to believe that, that's fine. But just anytime I've asked anybody, I'm like, okay, well, what evidence do you have? And they're like, oh, do your own research. Like, which is the same response you get from flat earthers. So I'm just saying. Anyways, we're going to unplug Toaster Shark and let's dive in. We start off in Egypt. I think we're at like Alexandria port or something like that. And we see a boat coming in hauling a ginormous piece of ice. I'm assuming this is where all of our bottled water is supposed to be coming from, right? They just haul in giant pieces of icebergs and they're like, bottled iceberg water, right? I assume so. No, of course, the shark is inside this giant thing of ice, and we see a couple of guys playing chess on the bridge, and then the captain starts reciting some poetry, and he's like, oh, it's Bukowski, haha, who cares? And we can see the ice starting to break apart, and we can see the shark inside of it starting to break free. And as it's breaking apart, the captain tries to attach some more ropes to the ice to try to keep it intact, I guess. But then the shark breaks free, and then it starts swimming through the port, and it goes back for the tugboat that it was like just pulling it. It flips it with its tail and sends the boat into the pyramids. This is an absolutely fantastic way to start off a movie, I gotta say. Just a giant shark flipping a fucking boat into the pyramids in Egypt. It doesn't get much fucking better than that as far as I'm concerned. It'll just, mwah. Thank you, Asylum. This was great. It's already ridiculous, but we get straight to the point. New shark. How? It's another one frozen in ice. Cool. So even if they destroy this one, the next movie, it's just like, oh, well, it was also in ice, probably. Or, my theory is the shark from Crocosaurus, the one that was in the volcano, is somehow going to come back. But I don't know. I haven't watched it yet. But that's my running theory right now. So we'll have to see next week and see if I'm actually right. We then see a variety of news reports that the UN has called for a worldwide boating ban, so no boats in the water. So at least in this world now, they've actually accepted that, like, the Megalodon exists, and they're taking precautions when one's spotted. They actually learned their lessons, unlike every other franchise where it's like, no, we're just going to keep opening this up and not do... I'm not going to get into it. But anyways, yeah, smart decisions are being made. Fuck me. I mean, this is basically the Meg and the Meg 2, more or less, this franchise. I imagine the books were written around the same time, so I wonder if they actually stole inspiration from the books. I've never read the books, but now I'm starting to think, but I don't know. If anybody does, let me know. I'd be interested in hearing that. And then we go to the Mecha Shark, and although this isn't the main Mecha Shark, this is a different Mecha Shark. There's two of them in this movie. This one is a tinier one, I guess. And it's being piloted by Rosie, played by Elisabeth Röhm, and she's talking to someone on a boat topside, and it's her husband, I guess, or I think they're husband and wife, played by Christopher Judge. But this little Mecha Shark reminds me a little bit of Robo Shark, which is really cool. Like, the design of this, I imagine they probably just used the same CG. I don't know if Robo Shark is the Asylum or not, though, but the design is very similar, but I like it. It was pretty cool. And again, the CG in this movie has definitely improved over the last couple, so now I'm actually really excited for next week's movie, but we'll talk about that more later on. As I said, her husband is played by Christopher Judge, and his name is Jack Turner, and he's the one on the boat topside, and they're just trying to test out, like, the shark's maneuvering capabilities and whatnot. And then the Mecha Shark is attacked by these two giant octopus, so she starts doing some, like, evasive maneuvers, and then I think they say electric eel skin, or just eel skin, and it just electrocutes whatever's outside of the ship, which is pretty cool, and it works, and the octopus swim off. But I guess now, just in this world, we're not that worried about giant octopus, because I'm sorry, these octopus were way bigger than normal ones, I believe. But I guess they're just not a threat in this world. Granted, it wasn't giant octopus in Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, but they're still pretty damn big. If I ever saw one, I would probably shit my pants. Jack and Rosie end up heading back to dry dock, and they're met by some admiral, and they're told it's ready. What is it? Well, they go into a warehouse, and this is where the bigger Mecha Shark is. And I don't know why we were introduced to one Mecha Shark right away, and then immediately introduced to this bigger one. I feel I don't know, I guess the typical thing to do would be you use the smaller one, and then it's oh, but wait, we have this bigger one, it's not ready, blah, 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 but here we go. Which is basically what ends up happening in this movie anyways. It ends up not being fully functional and capable yet when it meets the monster, spoiler alert. So, anyways, it doesn't matter, I'm taking this too seriously. So anyways, this Admiral Engelberg, he's just going to be called the Admiral. I'm not going to try and pronounce that name. Because I'm terrible at names, so we're just going to call him Admiral. You all know who I'm talking about. So he gives Jack and Rosie a tour of the shark, and by tour, I mean they stand on this ramp above it and just look down at this giant CG shark, so they don't go inside of it or anything. He's like, yeah, let me give you a tour, and we're just going to stand. That's like me taking you to a tour of my house, and then we just stand outside and look at it. That's not a tour. That's hey, you want to look at it? Look, there we go. And they're starting to talk about its weapons capabilities and whatnot. And then Rosie and the Admiral are disappointed that they couldn't get the approval to have nuclear weapons. And Jack is like, nah, I'm pretty glad you didn't because, it destroys the ecosystems and all of that. And I'm I'm kind of on board with him. I'm tired of every time it's oh, well, we got to use the nuclear thing. And it's I don't think you understand how fucking devastating that shit is. It's not just you might solve one problem, but you're going to create a shit ton of other ones. Listen, if you don't want to sit through Oppenheimer for 3 fucking hours, there's plenty of other documentaries that show you the real horrors of it. It's also terrifying that there's just nuclear weapons missing in the world. They're unaccounted for. Yeah, think about that while you're trying to sleep tonight. So the Admiral just continues giving specs, and he says it's basically ready to launch. And then this is the 3rd time we've heard that it's ready to launch. But then Jack leans over and he's like, what? Dude, when you guys first met at the boat thing, you're it's ready. On the radio, when they radio them to come back to dry dock, he's like, yeah, it's ready. And now he, 3rd time's the charm. It's oh, it's ready? Which, again, is actually not. It's not finished. They're just well, given the time that we have, blah, blah, blah. Because the shark is now shown back up, so they're yeah, let's not finalize this. Let's just... whatever. But anyways, Rosie says that, she is ready, so her and the Admiral start walking away, and then Jack is, behind her, kind of protesting this. But yeah, it seems like they're just going to go ahead with it anyways. And then out in the ocean, we see the Mega Shark attack and basically swallow a small fishing boat. The CG here is a massive improvement, so we get a good look at this shark, and I feel like this was the sweet spot for the Asylum CG. Just like I said, with the 2-headed and 3-headed shark attack movies, I actually kind of feel like it's the same model from 2-headed shark attack, but with 1 head. So just the original CG model that they had. That's my guess because it kind of looks like it, but I'm fine with it because it looks good, and so far this is just fucking entertaining. I'm having a good time. And then we see a live news report where a female reporter is asking a fisherman about the worldwide boating ban and how it's impacting the fisherman industry and all of that. And then we see this news report or whatnot pop up a bit, and it's Australian news for the most part, but they're not in Australia yet. They end up there eventually, towards the end of the movie, but throughout the whole movie, we are just seeing these news reports from Australia. I don't know why, because even when American ships have sunk, I know it's a budget thing. I get it. I know. Oh my god, I take this too seriously. I gotta let this just slide off of me, just just gooey chum. Just let it slide off my body. Think about that while you're sleeping tonight. Gooey chum all over my body. I mean, either that or missing nuclear weapons. That's your choice. I'm totally lost. I don't know where we are. We're talking about the news reports, but yeah. Anyways, Jack confronts Rosie in a locker room saying she can't go down on a sub that hasn't been tested yet and without Nero, which at first I thought was the name of the tiny sub. But later on, we find out that that's the name of the AI, because she was talking to an AI when she was piloting the sub. I just didn't really think too much about it. But this does become pretty fucking important later on. So remember the AI Nero. She kisses him and convinces him he needs to be with her, even though he doesn't really go in the sub at all. And then we see the Admiral getting a phone call, and it's from Debbie Gibson playing Emma McNeil. And she basically tells him the shark will be sticking around for a while unless it finds a mate. So, like, does this mean Mega Shark and Mecha Shark are gonna fuck at some point? Because I really hope that happens in this movie. I will be... Oh, that would just be amazing. That'd be so great. Will Mega Shark and Mega Shark fuck? This podcaster hopes so. We can see the Mecha Shark being towed by one of the naval ships as they head out to sea, and a submarine has just confirmed that the shark is around or headed their way. And I was like, why don't we just use the satellites from last week's movie? But then I realized, I'm like, oh, right, because it's only good at finding crocodile eggs for some reason. But they do explain this later on, and I know I have it in my notes somewhere, that they're like, well, when the shark dives to such deep depths, the satellites can't track it there. So I can kind of accept that, and they do find a solution, spoiler alert. So I'll kind of accept that they can't use the satellites to find the shark all of the time. But I kind of feel like they could use it some of the time, and they're just not. But I don't know, that's just me. So the ship reaches the target zone, and then Rosie starts getting the Mecha Shark sub ready to go. And this was just so satisfying. I don't know if anybody else likes the sound of like switches like clicking and flipping. I'm talking like the old school switches that you would find on like old stereos and stuff like that, like those kind of switches. So it's just a bunch of like these switches flipping and then like these LED lights coming on. It was just really satisfying to watch. And I was like, God damn, I'm having a good time right now. God damn, who's letting me have a good time? This is nonsense. And then we get like an internal engine shot of the Mecha Shark too, like we're at a Fast and Furious movie. And I think what they should do is they should have had a scene, totally a missed opportunity. They should have raced the two Mecha Sharks for pink slips. Like, that would have been amazing. Like, again, totally missed opportunity, boys. Rosie starts piloting the sub, and Jack navigates from the Navy ship. Like, why not from the sub to navigate? Like, I just imagine they couldn't pay Christopher Judge enough to pretend to be on a sub. Maybe. I don't know. I just feel like it would make more sense to be on the sub, so you're right there giving her the information. But then again, I'm stupid, and I don't know anything. The submarine locates the shark, and as they get ready to fire, Rosie tags it with like a GPS tracker. So for the first time in 3 movies, they finally tag it with a GPS tracker. It's like, I don't know why it took them this long to do this. But anyways, like last movie they played with like sonic balls. It was just a seaman and his balls, and that was it. And it gives me a headache sometimes, but I'm still having a good time. We're still having a good time here. We're all good. It's all good. So the submarine shoots a torpedo at the shark, and it bounces off and heads back to the sub. And then the sub starts floating, not the Mecha Shark, just like one of the actual Navy subs. And ladies and gentlemen, we had some practical water effects here. And we see this footage reused a few times because they'll sink a few more subs and ships later, and they'll just reuse this footage all over, which is fine. But it was just nice to see like some practical work being done here. I liked it. And then the sub finally explodes, and Jack says it took out a sub. Like, that's surprising. Like, we've seen the shark take out subs, planes, trains, and automobiles. Like, it takes out fucking everything. I don't know why we're surprised when it takes out, like, a submarine. Like, oh, man, I can't believe it took out a sub. It's like, oh, yeah, this isn't like this is the 3rd fucking time this has happened. Rosie starts chasing the shark and firing on it, and when she does, she starts losing control of the sub, but then she manages to ascend it back to the surface. And then when she gets on the ship, the Admiral chews her out and, like, kind of blames her for the sub getting sunk and whatnot. And, like, she apologizes, and he's like, I don't need apologies, I just need results. And it's like, fucking, sir, yes, sir. God damn. And then Jack gets in the middle, and he's like, yo, dude, like, let me actually fix the sub. Let me put the system into it. You'll lose a day out of it. And then it should be working fine. So this whole time, it would have taken an extra day to get the sub up to what like their standards would be. Oh my god! But instead, this admiral let a sub sink. Like, just get your sub, take your subs out of the water, go to dry dock, leave, and then when you're ready, you put them back in the water. Should I be in the military? No, that's a bad idea. A bad idea. Jack gets Nero to run some diagnostics, so he's finally installed it into the Mecha Shark, which is now going to make it better somehow. And now the AI is in control of the sub. I didn't realize how, like, relevant this movie was going to be to today, but here we are. And Nero assures Jack it will take care of Rosie. So this thing is, like, very, very aware of itself. Rosie gets ready in the washroom, and she has a bottle of alcohol, I'm assuming, and when Jack comes in, she quickly hides it. And so throughout this whole movie, she has been wanting him to quit smoking, but, like, she has this drinking problem. So, like, he doesn't really pay much attention to it. He's like, oh, no, I'm not looking at that, I'm looking at you. And I'm like, well, you should be a little concerned if she's going to be, like, piloting a sub and whatnot. Like, oh... Yeah, so, like, Jack and Rosie, fucking drinking problem. Just like Mom and Dad. We then see the Meg attack an oil rig near Pearl Harbor, I believe. And, yeah, the shark decimates the place again. CGI, not looking too bad here. We see it, like, attack underneath and whatnot. It's pretty good. It's a lot better than it's been in the last two movies. It's so much more enjoyable. It's kind of nice to, like, sit back and, like, not rage super hard on an episode. And, like, yeah, there's some silly things in this movie, and, like, even some silly things coming up, but overall, it's just entertaining. Like, you just sit back and let this wash over you, it's decent. I'm not saying it's, like, spectacular by any means. I'm not saying this movie needs, like, a reemergence or anything like that, but I don't know, man. I was pretty fucking entertained. I was also having a shitty day, so maybe that's why. Although I feel like if I was having a shitty day and I watched Mecha Shark versus Giant Octopus, it wouldn't have made me as happy as when I watched this movie. Rosie is now piloting Mecha Shark with Nero as Jack navigates and monitors from the ship as per usual. And then Rosie loses control of the sub again, and Nero says the water pressure is affecting his systems, and then the sub comes back online. I don't know what... Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I don't see how those two things are necessarily related, but... I mean, so far, this thing's holding up better than the Titan, so, I mean, what can I say? And so, anyways, moving on. She begins chumming the water as she descends. Not sure what the plan is. We have not established a plan, or if there even is a plan. I don't even know. They're just like, yeah, let's just go in the water and let's see what happens. The Mecha Shark shows up and starts swimming around them, and the Mecha Shark starts, like, chasing it, and then Rosie fires upon it and misses, and then the shark uses its tail to cut open a big pipe of oil, and the Admiral says that they can't shut it down because it's just not possible for this pipe to be turned off, and I'm like, okay, well, that's maybe a fail-safe system we should be looking into in the future, because that doesn't make any sense. So basically Rosie goes over it with the Mecha Shark and bends the pipe so it basically blocks it off. And then after that, she goes back to chasing the shark. And this whole time, the Admiral is like, no, we gotta leave, we gotta get the shark. And then Jack is just objecting because, like, oh, the environmental impact, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I get it, but, like, you could, like, she could go after the shark a bit, and then, like, you guys could do, I don't know. It just seems like there were other options here, but they did manage to fix it, or she managed to fix it pretty quickly. This was all fucking Rosie. And then we go to an airplane that's heading into restricted airspace, which is basically just the space above the water where the shark currently is right now. And then the Navy, who's monitoring the airspace, or the Air Force, whoever is monitoring the airspace, gets on the radio with the plane and says, like, no, you can't come here. And it's like, well, like, we're losing fuel or some shit. Like, we can't go anywhere else. And like, well, can you go to this island instead? They're like, nope, we can't. Just can't do it. And then the shark breaches the water and basically starts flying towards the passenger plane. I know they're trying to say, like, it moves so fast that it's, like, just going really high up in the air. It's flying. This plane is so high up. This thing is flying through the air right now. And then Jack gets on the radio and asks Rosie if she can do something, and she basically does the exact same thing. And so now these two sharks are just flying through the fucking air. Mecha Shark manages to knock Mega Shark out of the way, and the pilots see this, and they're like, yeah, we're going to change our course to that other place you told us to. And, like, they look at each other and like, huh, fuel problem be damned. I'm not going that way. So I guess, like, it wasn't that big of an emergency because they're totally just like, yeah, no, well, we'll risk it. I mean, if you're still flying over the ocean, that thing's still in there. So maybe think about that. But yeah, I don't think it was that big of an emergency after all. We go back with Rosie, who's chasing the shark. And as the shark attacks, she mentions the GPS tracker fell off, like, just right now. But when they were trying to find the shark earlier, they couldn't find it. They had to use sonar. So I don't know what the point of this GPS tracker was, because apparently it did absolutely nothing. It's about as useful as the satellites, apparently. She fires a torpedo, and the shark flicks it with its tail. It just sends it right for one of the other Navy ships, and then it ends up sinking that ship, of course. And then we get the reused footage of the water coming into the ship, and the seamen trying to leave the boat. There's always seamen trying to leave boats in these movies. My seamen leave all the time. Rosie starts feeling guilty and crying as Jack tries to tell her it's not her fault and she needs to kick this shark's ass. And then she gathers herself immediately, like flip of the switch, and like she's back in ass kicking mode. And so she follows the shark and they start like bashing into each other, and she shoots a torpedo at some underwater cliffs to cause like a big landslide. And then she basically just ends up trapping herself. I don't think anything happens to the shark as far as we know. So, horrible plan, did not work whatsoever except for trapping herself. And then she loses contact with the ship above. But the sub starts coming back to life, and Nero starts calling Rosie's name, and then like regaining contact with the ship. And it lets Jack know that Rosie is still alive, but like she's just kind of out of it or unconscious. And then the shark starts attacking some other ships, so our main ship starts heading to help them. On one of the ships, the captain forces some pilots to take off in some jets, like, no matter what. Like, I understand they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to fight this thing, but I'm also like, you could just get in your plane and go. Like, it's probably way safer. Like, I know the shark's jumping out of the water and shit, but do you really want to be, like, on the boat in the water, or would you rather be up in a plane? Like, granted, his objection is like, well, the boat's too tippy, we're never going to be able to take off. And I'm just like, dude, you're either, like, guaranteed to die or you have a chance. Like, come on. In this case, I actually kind of agree with this captain or whoever he was, like, forcing these dudes to take off. And I'm like, you might actually survive. I really don't think they do, but I mean, hey, it was worth a shot, right? Nero then sends a message to Jack saying like, oh, here's my calculations, I'm gonna do this thing. And Jack's like, what the fuck? And then so Nero sets off all these explosions around the sub, which basically helps it break free of the rocks. And he's like, oh, my calculations were correct. Haha. Like, yeah, that's scary, but anyways. The Meg is then attacking the aircraft carrier, and then Jack figures out why it's attacking, and it's because the ship is using some sort of, like, low-frequency emitters or something. Always with, like, did we not figure this out in other movies with the signals and emitters and whatnot also? Like, they learned some things, but not everything. It's like, not everybody's talking to each other here. And, like, Emma's still around, she knows, and she's not communicating this? Ugh. So the Mecha Shark comes back, and then Jack and the Admiral find Rosie passed out, and the other pilots trained to pilot the Mecha Shark were on the aircraft carrier. Why? Unclear. Why wouldn't they be on the same ship as... I mean, okay, I understand maybe not keeping them on the same ship as, like, the Admiral, but they should have been separated at least if your plan to not have them all in one place. So you didn't even do that properly, Admiral Douchebag. But then Nero chimes in and he says, like, oh yeah, I can pilot the sub now on my own. I don't need anybody to do this. And then Jack and the Admiral basically agree. They have, like, some, like, well, maybe not, but then they're like, oh, well, we don't really have a choice, so there we go. And so they bring Rosie off the sub, and then we get this super sad flashback, and it's basically like Jack and Rosie had a daughter, and then she was probably like 9 or 10 years old maybe, and then she got really sick and then died. So yeah, not super important right now, but it does come to play a little bit later on. I mean, we probably really didn't need this, but yeah, super fucking depressing. Rosie wakes up and Jack is waiting for her, and he tells her Nero has control of the sub now. And then Nero starts tracking the shark down, And the shark attacks, and Nero uses the eel skin attack again. And so it electrifies the shark. And then the shark just somehow manages to disable the sub again. It just like kind of hits it, and it's like, oh no, I'm disabled. And then the Admiral gets a call from McNeil, Debbie Gibson, and tells him she maybe has the key to everything. So then Jack goes to Rosie and asks her if she's up for traveling as she's pouring her booze out. So good for you, girl. She's, she's getting rid of her alcohol. She's going to be sober-minded. And then they go to New Zealand. My God, I can't talk today. They go to New Zealand to Emma McNeil's research center. So I guess she's pretty famous at this point. And she says she's been able to track down the shark using the satellites now. So as I explained earlier, they're like, oh, it dives too deep, we can't. And so now she says she's found like some warming current that it seems to be following, and it's leading to some ancient breeding ground, which is in Sydney, Australia. I don't know the science behind it, but it's like, okay, this is kind of why we're seeing Australia all the time, because this is the end point. But yeah, she discovered some warm current that the shark is following. So, I mean, at least the science isn't, like, super out there. I don't believe it's super accurate, but I mean, hey, we've seen way more insane shit. And she reiterates, and I'm pretty sure she said it earlier, that if this shark doesn't find a mate, then it's not going to be a very happy boy. And I'm like, dude, I feel ya. Man, I really hope it fucks the sub. I really hope that happens. Jack is fixing up his computers and comes back into contact with Nero, and it like has to run some like diagnostics or whatever. And then Rosie tells the Admiral the shark is definitely headed for Sydney. And then the Admiral pats Jack on the back and like, hey, it's mating season, and then just walks away. I don't think Jack knows like exactly about this, why the shark is going there, because it used to be a breeding ground. So like Jack is just like, what? So yeah, he has no idea. The ship arrives at Sydney, and the shark sinks one of the ships, and Nero starts headed for the shark, and then Rosie is on land and is helping a woman find her daughter, so this is kind of where the flashback comes back into play. And then, of course, she refuses to leave until she finds this woman's daughter. So, like, throughout, we see, like, Navy officers and other military, like, people trying to get her to evacuate, but she's like, no, not until we find this little girl or whatever. And then Nero goes offline again, and they reiterate that the shark is horny, and Emma says if they don't find the shark a mate soon, it's going to get really aggressive. So yeah, again, we just keep reiterating the same fucking thing. We know it's horny. I get it. I've been there. Well, like it's a horny shark. Someone needs to like, get in there and get a little tickle. And then the Mecha Shark ends up going into drone mode, which the Admiral basically explains makes it into a torpedo. It just, like, it's kind of mindless, and then it sets for a target so it can just, like, ram into it and explode, I guess. And then the Mega Shark launches the Mecha Shark onto the Sydney Opera House, and then Jack launches his, like, littler Mecha Shark, and he heads for the harbor. And then Jack runs to the Opera House, and he argues with a Navy guard and tells him he's with the U.S. Navy, but he doesn't have his ID. But he points that he just showed up in a giant mechanical shark, and that should be good enough. And I'm just like, okay, not good enough, but I mean, in this chaos, like, if somebody just shows up in a giant shark, just be like, oh, you fucking do what you want, I don't care. None of this makes sense. So he manages to get past this guard, and he finds Rosie. So the Admiral is monitoring the Mecha Shark, and he's, like, trying to push a kill switch, but it doesn't work. And then we see on the screen, it says, transition to, or activate amphibious mode. Oh, let's fucking go. So, yeah, the Admiral tries pushing the switch again. It doesn't work. Jack and Rosie watch the shark grow, like, tank treads. So now there's just this, like, giant shark tank rolling through Sydney in Australia. Amazing. And this little girl that Rosie has been looking for is standing right in front of it. And the sub recognizes her as non-threatening, so it's fine at first. And then these soldiers come in and surround her. And then the sub is like, oh my god, everything's dangerous, I want to kill everybody. And yeah, so that pisses the sub off. And it tries to eat the little girl. And then Jack scoops her up and starts running with her. And then Rosie shows up in a Hummer right behind them. So they all get in and drive off. I gotta say, like, good on Rosie for actually, like, going and grabbing a vehicle. Like, everybody else is just running. She's like, I'm gonna get a fucking car so we can get out of here. She's one of the only, like, she's making a lot of dumb decisions, but she's also one of the only people making, like, the smartest decisions in this movie. So, I mean, we can appreciate that. And then the Mecha Shark ends up running over the reporter and the camera guy we've been seeing throughout the entire movie. So they just, they really didn't matter. I don't know if we're supposed to feel anything about that, but I thought it was pretty funny. So I hope that's what they intended. Chaos ensues throughout the city, car crashes, fires, people freaking right the fuck out. And then Emma calls Rosie, who explains the mecha isn't on their side anymore. And Emma suggests that they use the Meg to destroy the Mecha Shark because the Meg will view the mecha as a male shark as a threat and try to destroy it. So, like, they're not going to fuck after all. Like, they're going to see each other as opponents. Like, there was a missed opportunity for some, like, shark on robot shark love action, and we were denied it. And I'm a little disappointed in that. This movie could have gotten a full star if they had shown me that. But, goddamn. Disappointing. It's still pretty cool, but I'm just saying, disappointing it didn't get super weird. They reunite the little girl with her mother, and then the Mecha Shark starts rolling down the street, and Rosie says she's going to go inside the Mecha Shark and set off some pulse from inside. And there's like a torpedo that's jammed in one of the bays or something, so she's going to send this pulse to attract the shark, so it'll bite on the torpedo bay and kill it. So this is their final plan to kill this thing. So she hands Jack a Bluetooth headset, and she heads inside. She gets inside by jumping on a bunch of Hummers and then just leaping inside of its mouth. And then Jack comes up with a plan to lure it back to sea. And his plan is basically whistling at it and getting it to follow him on a motorcycle. Back out at sea, the Admiral starts dropping depth charges on the Mega Shark. I don't know why. Like, he's just pissing it off at this point. I'm not really sure what they're trying to accomplish. We have seen so many times their conventional weapons don't work and they're still fucking firing upon this thing like it's gonna do anything. Do something different. Like, fucking, I don't know, shit on it. Surprise me. And then we see the Admiral come out onto the deck, and he just starts shooting at the shark with his little pistol as if that's going to do anything. And then we get that footage reused of the seamen escaping the boat. So many seamen just, like, pouring off the sides of the boat. And then the ship explodes. Rosie sets off the device, and then she's planning her escape out of the Mecha Shark. We see Jack stop his bike as a bunch of jets are flying overhead. And he starts waving at them, say, like, don't shoot. And I'm just like, dude, they are not going to see you. I understand what you're trying to do, but, like, they are not going to see you in any way, shape, or form. And I get it. He doesn't want the jets to fire upon the Mecha Shark because they're trying to use it. Why they wouldn't have communicated this with the Admiral, maybe, or somebody else in charge, I don't know. I guess the Admiral's, like, floating in the water now because they, sank his fucking ship, but still, could have told somebody. So he gets on the radio and he tells Rosie to brace for impact, and she is stuck in the chum reserves. So they have, like, chum reserves on this ship, so when they're trying to lure the shark, they just, like, drop a bunch of it in the water. Pretty genius. This Mecha Shark is pretty fucking impressive when it works properly. So the jets fire, and it sends Mecha Shark flying over top of Jack, and then I guess it ends up landing back in the water. And then we see Jack go into his, like, littler Mecha Shark, and then he gets inside of it, and he pilots it right into the mouth of the bigger Mecha Shark. And then he starts talking with Nero, and he tries to take the sub back over. Nero empties the chum stores, and it frees Rosie. And then we go back to the surface, and we see the Admiral is still floating there, and he's celebrating that he's alive. Oh my god, I'm alive. And then, of course, the fucking Meg comes and eats him up, so he's dead. I thought he was okay. I didn't really want to see him die, but, I mean, at least he died in a pretty funny way, I thought. So, at least that was something. Jack manages to get Rosie safely back to shore. The shark bites down on the Mecha Shark, and it explodes, raining guts all over Jack and Rosie. So yeah, we actually had, like, a little bit of practical guts. Not a lot, but we actually had something. That was cool, and I don't think we've seen that in this series yet, so I really appreciated that. And then they just, like, gaze into each other's eyes, and then they gaze out at sea, and then Jack is like, thanks, Nero. Thanks for all your help. And then he, like, pulls out a USB, And Rosie's like, what's that? And he's like, oh yeah, it's Nero. I have him on here. I'm like, then why'd you do this dramatic fucking turn at the sea and thank him when he was in your pocket? You had little Nero in your pocket. You didn't need to say goodbye. Little Nero's gonna be okay. Anyways, then Jack says, we can do this later because, Rosie, we have some explaining to do. Which was just weird. I'm like, your last line is an I Love Lucy reference, which maybe somebody in this cast was in I Love Lucy. I don't know. Because, like, the line is, like, Lucy, you have some explaining to do. So I don't know what this connection is. And I don't know why it's here, but it was very weird. But yeah, we just see them walk off onto the beach, and we see some, like, CG Hummers and, like, helicopters starting to land. And then some, like, really dope pop punk song plays at the end, which I was very much digging. Can't remember the name of the song, but it was by the Velvet Tea Party. I sat through the credits just so I could find that out. And yeah, that is the end. And you know what? That was fun. This was dumb fun. This is what I want in these nonsensical movies. Like, they took my notes from the first one, like they went in a time machine and they fixed it. That's what I assumed happened. But no, like they improved upon the CGI. There wasn't as much nonsensical like storylines happening, I found at least. And there was a lot more like actual versing that they were fighting. There was so much fighting in this movie. Like, this was actually like a monster movie, like a kaiju movie where they're actually fighting. Like, holy shit. And I mentioned earlier, the Mecha Shark reminds me of Robo Shark a lot. More so the smaller one, not as much the bigger one, but still, yeah, it was so cool to even see that. Some notable trivia from IMDb. On the lobster boat near the beginning, the skipper says the harbor master is going to have a heart attack when he sees what we brung him, which is a direct nod to a similar phrase spoken by Robert Shaw in Jaws. So I like that they have a Jaws reference in here, but it's not as like egregious as like some of the more famous Jaws lines. I appreciated that, or like having a character named like Brody or something like that. So this was nice. It's a little bit more subtle, but you still got the Jaws reference in there, which, you know, apparently people feel the need to always put in. And also, another piece of trivia I liked, when Nero is uploaded into the Mecha Shark computer, he recites all the same words HAL 9000 recites when Dr. Chandra reloads him in 2010, the year we made contact, from 1984, which is actually the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Yeah, if you didn't know, 2001: A Space Odyssey has a fucking sequel. And it's got Roy Scheider from Jaws in it, which is pretty awesome. This is definitely getting 2.5 stars on Letterboxd from me. Like, I had a great time. All the nonsense didn't matter that much because I was always interested in what was happening, and I was just entertained, and that's why I watch these movies. I want to be entertained, and this movie accomplished that. And I actually immediately followed it up with Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, which was also a lot of fun. A lot of fighting in that movie, too. I see a lot of people complain, like, oh, take the human element out of it. And I'm like, dude, this is the most fighting we've had in a monster movie. And I felt the same way about this one. So far in this series, this is the most, like, monster fighting we've had. And I'm so excited. Next week's movie is Mecha Shark versus Colossus. I'm not going to say much else about it, but it looks like a really good time. And if the CG is at least on par with this movie, if not a little bit better, I think it's going to be an awesome time. So I hope you guys will listen for that. But that's it for Mecha Shark versus Mecha Shark from 2014. As always, you know you can follow me on all the social medias. That's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Slasher, all at Bucket of Chum Podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I would appreciate a like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that, if you can leave a rating or a review, all that kind of stuff helps get the podcast out there. It helps get it noticed more. And it's like basically a free way you can help support me. And if you also want to support the podcast in another way, you can go to patreon.com/bucket of chum. And for $3 a month, we do a monthly episode, newsletter. You get the video and audio versions of the podcast, usually a few days early. So yeah, there's all kinds of great stuff going on there. But as always, I'm your host, Captain Steve, and I'll see you guys next week for more Bucket of Chum.